No matter how egalitarian a society tries to become, eventually designated individuals will be set apart to perform certain tasks that everyone else doesn't have to busy themselves with. Over time, that person will be entrusted with those tasks to repeat competently over and over so that everyone else can think about something else in life that they need to do. And this is no different with regard to the subculture of religion. I've had experiments that I've done with courses in college classes in the past where people told me that they somehow were averse to organized religion. And I say, fine, but if you don't like the existing structures, let's invent a new one. And we'll go through an exercise of trying to invent a new religion right there in class. And it's a little bizarre, but nevertheless, the students run with it. And we talk about the different things that they naturally were going to have together. They're going to have sacred myths related to their beliefs. They're going to have eventually they will have sacred times because they want to meet regularly and they want to know when that happens. They're going to eventually have sacred space because there's one spot there they can eventually all count on to meet in the one place again, and it winds up becoming something of a special spot where they meet. And so all these elements of the sacred come together, and inevitably someone gets designated, and this always happens, someone gets designated to remember what the sacred myths were, where we're meeting, when we're meeting, what we do when we come together. And that person curates all those elements of the sacred, and that person winds up being the designated holding sacred office. Now, sacred office isn't universal across cultures. There's shamans and mediums and medicine men of different types. In other cultures, you even see sometimes this is expressed in the feminine, masculine, sometimes expressed in the feminine. In ancient cultures, in some places, you would see oracles and priestesses and mediums of different types. But nevertheless, no culture is exempt from this idea of someone holds sacred office. We're going to point at someone and designate that person and say, you curate all of our elements of the sacred. Remember what they are, because we're busy doing the other, comparatively common things of life, like commerce, war, agriculture, bureaucracy, and the various different things we have to maintain with our household rituals. And so we want a designated individual who's going to facilitate our interaction with the divine. They're going to hold sacred office and curate and maintain and navigate all these elements of the sacred. They're actually not free to just make stuff up as they go, because they have to maintain what our expectations are when the community gathers. The ritual specialist can't just make up new ritual as they go, because when they fail to meet the expectations of the ritual participants, you create ritual anxiety. And throughout cultures and throughout time, you see evidence where people can still vote with their feet, even if their freedom to do so looks different than, say, in a Western society now. Nevertheless, the ritual specialist, the person holding sacred office, is someone who is they don't hold that sacred office when they're performing sacred rites. They're authorized to perform those sacred rites by means of their sacred office. And so oftentimes you will see that person carries that office with them all around wherever they go. Now, I've had this objection before where someone will say, well, I come from a tradition where we don't have priests and people holding sacred office. I understand that, and yet that person will still, when they're in the hospital, will still think of, ask the pastor to come pray for me. Even though they, have outward signs of wanting to reject organized religion, they still are wanting that person holding sacred office when they come. That same person will talk to a person someone holding sacred office out in the normal life, and even if that person isn't wearing any regalia, any uniform, anything that would denote their sacred office, they'll still call them pastor or father or whatever. The point is that person holds it with them wherever they go. So sacred offices within any given tradition are to be expected. They're inevitable. We really can't get away from them. Again, no matter how egalitarian we'd like to say we want to be, you're never going to get away from this idea of a designated individual, a ritual specialist, who is going to curate and navigate all the elements of the sacred on your behalf so that you don't have to think about it all the time. Because for the most part, humans like to designate specialty. Now, in our tradition, we have different sacred offices. We have the core sacred office of what's referred to as a deacon. This person is an ordained individual to basically be a servant. They do whatever the bishop tells them, and that person is going to be serving in the church. They're going to be serving in that capacity to assist however they can, and under the direction of typically of a local priest, but under the direct orders of a regional bishop. And then to that core understanding of a deacon, you can then add the responsibilities of a priest, who will then be authorized to do more of that sacred office, to perform more rites and more functions than just the deacon was, but they never lose that core of being a servant to all. And then you might add to that a layer of being someone who is an overseer over many clergy, overseer over a region, overseer over many churches, a jurisdiction of places where they have the responsibility of knowing what is the spiritual health of a whole jurisdiction. And that person would be designated as a bishop. Now, that bishop has added more responsibility, but of course, having never lost the responsibilities of a priest and never having lost the core of a servant. In that way, our sacred office has this special burden that is laid upon people that we call clergy, a burden that, quite frankly, to some is, well, oftentimes pursued mainly because they don't understand it. It's a burden. It's something that is placed upon like a pack mule or another beast of burden that you would place your heavy load that you really don't want to carry yourself. This is the idea of a sacred office, and we do that in any sort of organized religion. And people say, I don't like organized religion, but they are religious at heart. And you typically like someone to organize something on your behalf so that you are busy with other things of life. You can then take the comfort of, letting a specialist to handle those things. Can that give itself over to abuse when people get power hungry? Absolutely. And the church is a human institution that is not immune to such things. But nevertheless, just because that beast of burden sometimes gets out of line doesn't mean that doesn't make them necessary. And as a result, we are thankful that in my situation, yes, all this could be seemingly seem self-serving because I'm someone who's been designated with one of those offices myself. But I'm very thankful that I'm within a network, I'm within a tradition that sees us all as knowing our place, as to who we serve and who we're under, and we have oversight. But that's how you want a healthy organization, a healthy institution to work, because sacred offices are inevitable. And the abuses come mostly when you don't think it through and are not thoughtful about who should do this, have a proper perspective about this, and how are they serving those around them. That's all I have to say for today. Have a blessed day.